First, plasma membrane or cell membrane. We will study about this plasma membrane. Plasma membrane is the outermost covering of the cell that separates the contents of the cell from its external environment. Means, like imagine a cell is there, its outermost covering. What is its outermost covering is the plasma membrane, is called a plasma membrane. Now, what will plasma membrane do? Plasma membrane separates the contents of the cell. Like contents must be present inside the cell. So plasma membrane separates the contents inside the cell from its external environment. Means plasma membrane is a barrier outside the environment and inside the cell. So it divides the contents to be inside the cell from its external environment. The plasma membrane also allows or permits the entry and exit of some materials in and out of the cell. It also prevents movement of some other materials. This is that plasma membrane is the outermost covering of the cell. So it is sure that plasma membrane will only allow or permit the entry or exit of the materials inside and outside the cell. Means the outside, whatever the contents are there, they should have the permission of plasma membrane to come inside the cell. Therefore, plasma membrane is also known as cell membrane. Remember that, don't get confused. Therefore, it is called a selectively permeable membrane. Plasma membrane is called a selectively permeable membrane. Now, how does the movement of substances take place in the cell? How to move out substances or move out of the cell? We will be knowing about this. Now, means we have studied that the plasma membrane will only allow the entry and exit of the materials inside and outside the cell. Now, how these movements take place? Some substances like carbon dioxide or oxygen can move across the cell membrane by a process called diffusion. Now, what is diffusion? The area which has low concentration and the area which has high concentration. So, the region of high concentration, the substance in the region of high concentration will move to a region of low concentration. This is called diffusion. Means, like, see that this is a cell, and from a cell, external environment of cell, there is high concentration of materials, and inside the cell there is low concentration. So the outside materials will come inside to the cell. Or if imagine that the contents present in the cell are more than in the external environment, so the contents will move out of the cell by the process of diffusion. Now, something similar to this happens in cells. Some substances like CO2, which is cellular waste, in high concentration inside the cell. See, example is here. The concentration of CO2 is low as compared to that inside of the cell. Whenever there will be a difference inside and outside the cell, the concentration of CO2 inside and outside a cell, CO2 will move out of the cell from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration by the process of diffusion. Similarly, O2 enters the cell by diffusion when the level of concentration inside the cell decreases. Thus, diffusion plays an important role in gaseous exchange between the cells as well as the cell and its external environment. Means we have studied here how does the movement of substances. So the movement of these substances take place in and out of the cell through the process of diffusion. I hope you should have understood it. Now we will move to the next topic. Water also obeys the law of diffusion. The movement of water molecules through such a selectively permeable membrane is called osmosis. Now see, The process of carbon dioxide and oxygen to move in and out of the cell is diffusion. But the process of water is different. Water moves in and out of the cell by a process called osmosis. The movement of water molecules, the molecules present in water, through such a selectively permeable membrane. What is selectively permeable membrane? Selectively permeable membrane is the plasma membrane. Is called osmosis. So the osmosis is the process of the movement of water across the plasma membrane from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration through a selectively permeable membrane is called osmosis. Now, what will happen if we will put an animal cell or plant cell into the solution of sugar or salt in water? Now, one of the three things could happen. We will learn these three things. First is a hypotonic solution. What is a hypotonic solution? If the medium surrounding the cell has a higher water concentration than the cell, that the outside solution is very dilute, the cell will gain water by osmosis. Like for example, the cell is there and the cell's external environment, the water is present more. So we have studied that the substance in higher concentration will move to low concentration. So water is present more, so it will move inside the cell. So this is called a hypotonic solution. So what will happen if we will put an animal cell into a solution of sugar or salt in water? See, if we will put an animal cell in the sugar or salt and water, so the water will come inside of the cell. In a hypotonic solution, the water will come inside the cell. So animal cell has only plasma membrane, not a cell wall, so it will ultimately burst. Now second is isotonic solution. If the medium is exactly the same water concentration as the cell, there will be no net movement of water across the cell membrane. Means see, if the external environment and the inside the cell will be of equal amount, there will be no movement. It will be like that only, whether an animal cell or a plant cell will be in that. If the plant cell will be in hypotonic solution, it will not burst, but animal cell will burst because it do not have cell membrane. Cell membrane will protect the plant cell. Now the third is hypotonic solution. If the medium has low concentration of water than the cell, meaning that it is a very concentrated solution, the cell will lose water by osmosis. Like imagine that the water present inside the cell is more than its external environment, so water will move out of the cell from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration by osmosis. So in hypotonic solution, the cell will swell up. In isotonic solution, the cell will remain the same. In hypertonic solution, the cell will shrink. I hope you have understood these three things. Thus, now osmosis is a special case of diffusion through a selectively permeable membrane. This is an activity, you will read it and understood. Unicellular freshwater organisms and most plant cells tend to gain water through osmosis. Absorption of water by plant roots is also an example of osmosis. If they would be asked that give examples of osmosis, so you would write that unicellular freshwater organisms and most plant cells tend to gain water by osmosis. Third example would be absorption of water by plant roots is also an example of osmosis. Now, diffusion is important in exchange of gases and water in the life of a cell. The cell also obtains nutrition from its environment. More different molecules move in and out of the cell through a type of transport requiring use of energy. They would of course use energy to move in and out of the cell. So we are talking about that only now. The plasma membrane. Now the description of plasma membrane is given. How is it made up of? The plasma membrane is very flexible and is made up of organic molecules called lipids and proteins. We will study afterwards how are lipids and proteins made. So plasma membrane is flexible and it is made up of lipids and proteins. We can saw the structure of plasma membrane through a microscope. Now, the flexibility of plasma membrane or cell membrane also enables the cell to engulf in food and other material from its external environment. This process is called endocytosis. Amoeba acquires its food through the process of endocytosis. Means, see, that the flexibility. We have studied that the plasma membrane or cell membrane is very flexible. So, it will enable the cell to engulf in food. Means the cell can engulf in food by the plasma membrane. So this engulfing of food with the help of the flexibility of cell membrane and other material from external environment is called the endocytosis. Amoeba acquires its food through this process only, that is endocytosis. I hope you have understood this. Now we will continue next in our next session. Till then, bye bye. Take care.